It's really a pleasure to be here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, this is not work for me. It's not like work at all. They pay me to do this wonderful thing of coming up and sharing good news with friends. You know, and that's basically what all of us do, right? Our friends and our family, we go and we try to help them navigate this thing called life, because when you're born, you are put in charge of the single greatest thing in all of existence, a human body, and there's no owner's manual, right? So it's all sort of learned by osmosis, sort of rubbing up against the thing. And sadly, too many of the children of the world today come from parents who never got that education done very well in the first place. Unlike my father, who was 90, who lived on the farm, and they, you know, if you lived on a farm, you learned about things that were good for you and things that weren't. And I think because of that, he is 90 and still fully functional and strong and vigorous. But what did they eat? They ate great foods. They grew just about everything that they ate. And what they didn't grow and eat, the guy next door or downtown, the baker, the butcher, whoever it was that was the local community of food providers, did that. And it was a very healthful place to be. There were a lot of other things going on that made life dangerous, like contaminated water and infectious diseases and so on and so forth. But the food thing was doing pretty well. As we worked to get rid of the contaminated water and the infectious diseases, we messed up the food supply. Okay. So what I want to do this evening is just share a few things with you. Those of you who saw me in San Francisco, I'm going to go back over some of those things. That was a couple of months ago, but in those couple of months, there's been a whole lot of what I call late-breaking news that's come out about the subject. So I'm going to introduce you to some late-breaking news, too, some of the latest things that are being discovered here. Can I have the next slide, please? I don't have a clicker. I'm clickerless. And there we go. That's me. Quickly, just in case I don't look like me. That slide is just for me to remind myself to tell you a little bit about my story. I actually joined Jerry Brassfield and GNLD in 1968. I was a college student. I had been actually grown up in Silicon Valley, gone to school there, became an engineer, worked at NASA on guidance control systems and flight simulators at Moffett Field. We did a really great job getting the Apollo moon project done, so as a reward I was drafted. Okay, it's a true story. And I went into the Army, and I eventually convinced them to let me go, please. And they let me go. I went back to school, and while I was in school, I got a job working in a factory that Jerry owned as the graveyard janitor. I would go to school during the day, and then I would work in the factory at night, and I would eat the rest of the time and get no sleep. To make a long story short, I graduated eventually studying chemistry and was offered a job in the factory and went from the janitor, the graveyard janitor, to the production manager, to the purchasing manager, to the plant manager, and on up the line. And 45 years later, here I am. So I have been through the product side of this thing from the very, very bottom with the broom, looking around saying, what is this junk on the floor? And why are they so messy, right? All the way up to saying, let's not get any junk on the floor and let's not be messy. So one of the things that makes this company stand out above and beyond all others out there is this slide you see up there right now, based in nature, backed by science. Can I have the next slide, please? When we say nature, though, we don't mean just natural. A lot of companies out there got stuff that's natural. Doesn't mean it belongs in your body. In theory, everything on the planet is natural, okay? Meaning that it's here naturally. There's a lot of man-made junk, but a lot of natural stuff has no place in your body. What we mean is human natural, things that are natural for humans, the whole food, human food chain sort of thing when it comes to nutrition. So when we say natural, we don't mean just natural, any sort of natural, we mean human natural. Next slide, please. We also mean, when we say backed by science, we mean real science from real scientists. You know, our scientific advisory board was founded around one of the great scientists of all times, one of the most preeminent scientists of the last century, Dr. Arthur First. I always used to tell people, if you got everybody together of Dr. caliber and capabilities and sat them down for lunch, you could sit them at a table for 4. Of all of the scientists that did all of this work over all of those years, Dr. First is credited with some of the great discoveries, chemotherapy and things like that. When he transitioned to the idea, rather than treating cancers and other diseases, to preventing them, is when he came to GNLD and changed the way we do things. And ever since then, we have been guided by this idea that given the right things, the body has the capacity to protect itself from just about everything. Even a bullet if you're fast enough to get out of the way. Next slide, please. Along the way, we had developed this reputation for good science and had an opportunity to have these sorts of folks as research partners. U.S. Department of Agriculture, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and on. I won't read the list. Those of you who know the company know the list. I just remind you that you can't buy your way into this group. You have to earn your way into this group. You know, the USDA makes any sort of research budget we might have look like pennies. Okay, same with the CDC. The reason that we got involved with them is from doing work, high quality science from years. They actually approached us and asked us to work with them on a few projects. Next slide, please. All of that work resulted in a bunch of things that other companies wish they had, and that is peer review publication, proof that their products work. This puts you, the distributor, in a very powerful position because you don't have to say, you know, trust me, they work. Okay, believe me, they work. You can say, look, it's right here in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition or the Journal of the American College of Nutrition or any one of these other journals. I'll talk more about that in a little while, just so you can get a full grasp of what that means. But it's a very powerful position to be in. They don't have to take your word for it. They can take the word of some of the leading researchers in the world. Next slide, please. The result of all this is life-changing products. You all know that. I know that. There's a bunch of people out there that need to know that because their lives need to be changed. Okay, they are clinging to health, some of them not very tenaciously, you know, falling off all the time, getting further and further into what we call metabolic debt, trying to deal with the life that they're confronted with. So all of this work, this commitment to nature, human natural, and backed up with science, but not just any science, solid science from real scientists working with the best scientific institutions in the world, published in the most respected peer-reviewed journals in the world, really separate our company from others. Next slide, please. What I'd like to do now is talk about that philosophy and how we put that at play and how, though we've been doing this for years, the scientific community is coming along and catching up to us. And I don't say that with disrespect to the scientific community because, you know, science moves at a certain pace. The advantage we have in GNLD is we started from a better starting point, okay? And we had the ability to be intuitive about what we did by checking off nature's blueprint. Nature's blueprint will give you a lot of feedback. Somehow you got to think, if it doesn't make sense in nature's blueprint, it probably doesn't make sense. It's that simple. So we moved forward a long time ago with complex product ideas and complex technologies that are now being embraced quite widely, and more so to a degree than we even expected. The power of what's being said about the technology, the products that we deliver is compelling. Next slide, please. We'll take a look at a little video here. Can we play that video? Did you guys see that CBS News thing? I played it at convention. If you don't have this, you should go online and find it. We're going to launch it back there. The rocket master's getting ready to ignite. Have you seen that before? Yeah. Some of you saw that? That is such a compelling little bit of evidence about how our product, Carotenoid Complex, is such a powerful product. If you listen to what she said there were some key statements. You know, carotenoids and their ability to protect you and so on and so forth. Can I have the next slide, please? It's based on this little piece of research here that you see from this is the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. That's what the JNCI stands for. And if you look at that slide, you can see that the researchers highlighted some key things about this piece of research that is the background for that piece you just saw. One of those is that higher circulating carotenoid levels, you notice I've highlighted that, or people with that, women with that, are at a reduced risk of breast cancer, according to the study published in December. Okay, what's important there is higher circulating carotenoid levels. That means that they have to be in your bloodstream. Doesn't matter if they're in your product. If they don't get in your bloodstream, so what? You might as well, use them to paint your house. Another one coming up here, and the one right below that, it says studies have shown that carotenoids inhibit the tumor progression and reduce proliferation of estrogen-sensitive breast cancer. Now, again, this is not somebody saying they might do this, or we think that they'll do this, or hopefully they'll do this. These things have been proven. This is the National Cancer Institute telling us that carotenoids do this. And then down on that last page, it says over 3,000 subject, blah, blah, blah. Individual and total carotenoids. And that's where the science is starting to catch up with this. They're starting to recognize that carotenoids, and there are many of them, have individual bioactive functions in the body, but they also work in synergy with one or more other carotenoids to get something done. So if you think of it like this, think of it like you're going to play baseball, right? Most of our competitive products would have a first baseman, a shortstop, and a center fielder at most. Okay? No way you're going to win the baseball game if you don't have somebody on every base. Baseball team is a synergistic relationship. Each of them plays an individual role, but together they make the team functional. The same thing applies with carotenoids. That's where science is beginning to catch up. It's something that we've been saying for years and years and years, since the 1990s, actually before that, late 1980s, when we first started drawing attention to these nutrients. That individual carotenoids are powerful, but it's the combined total of all of them together that provides the benefit. Next slide, please. Here's another one. This is a little older study. This goes back to, I think, 2005, from the Journal of Clinical Oncology. It says plasma carotenoids. Again, that's an important word. Plasma means the carotenoids in your blood, and the recurrence-free survival of women with a history of breast cancer. Again, you'll see the results. Women with the highest quartile of plasma total carotenoids, the total carotenoids in the blood concentration, had significantly reduced risk. So these are very important ideas, and they continue to grow from there. So when it comes to carotenoids, next slide, please. No one knows carotenoids like we do. These are things that I can remember when the Scientific Advisory Board went to the Board of Directors and said, we want to introduce a product called carotenoids. We believe that carotenoids are going to become a household word and that they're going to change the face of health protection and disease prevention in the world. And their response was, no one's going to be able to say that word. Okay? So it was a brand new word at the time. Nevertheless, they trusted in the scientists and said, let's bring this product to market, and we did many years ago. It was a first. I'll tell you more about first tomorrow, but I want to point to this one right now. It's a first in many, many, many ways, not the least of which is that it's made from carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, and apricots. That's what it says right there on that slide. All dispersed in olive oil with a pinch of natural vitamin E. Okay. What makes that different is at the time, the technology to do that, to take spinach, think of a spinach leaf now, and extract the carotenoids from that. Okay? Well, you wouldn't first think that there's a lot of carotenoids in spinach, but you can prove it to yourself that there are. Grab a spinach leaf, rub it between your hands, and voila, yellow hands. Okay? They'll be greenish yellow because there's some chlorophyll there too. But the process of getting those out didn't exist. As a matter of fact, the standards of identity, the things that you use in your analytical equipment that enable you to identify a carotenoid, was brand new. We had to actually develop these technologies with people. So we were the first to bring this sort of product to market. And that led to a whole series of other things. Next slide, please. Because of those, our ability to do those extractions, our carotenoid complex is not just one carotenoid or 2 or 3 or 4, but there's 15 of them that have been identified. They're all right here. And some of those names, compared to the name carotenoid, are very, very complicated. Everybody knows how to say beta-cryptosanthin, I'm sure, right? You talk about it on the radio all the time. My grandsons come talk to me about beta-cryptosanthin or violazanthin or whatever that might be. So, and that's a very, very big difference. It's that idea that you have all of these carotenoids, that you don't need just one, despite what our competitors would have you believe, or some researchers would have you believe. Beta-carotene is good for making you orange, but by itself, that's just about all it's going to do. Okay? It needs other things to be involved there, and I'm going to show you some of the latest science that points at that. Next slide, please. Here's one right here. You can see what I've done is I've taken these different research papers, and then of those 15 carotenoids that you see listed down the side there, I highlight the ones that are involved in this study. In this particular study, you can see alpha-carotene, beta-carotene, lutein, and lycopene. And this was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition here recently. And it said lung cancer risk was significantly lower in subjects who consumed diets high in a variety of carotenoids. Okay, diets high in a variety. When there's a variety of these things in your diet, your probability of lung cancer is significantly reduced. If you want to get a variety of carotenoids in supplementation form, we're the only choice you have. Especially whole food, human food chain choice. There's some out there that will sell you, pond scum ones, Dunaliella salina, or others from Blake's-Lea trispora. That's an asexual fungus. Yeah. They're out there. Some of our competitors use it. Fine competitors, just not really maybe as serious as we are, use those sorts of things. And you can see that there was a big benefit, 63%. If you see that number up there, it says subjects who never smoked, a 63% lower incidence. So if you're doing whatever you can, the probability of getting lung cancer, even if you never smoked, is dramatically reduced with carotenoids. Next slide, please. Here's another one. Here's actually a couple. One from the British Journal of Nutrition. It says here that high intakes of carotenoids, including alpha, beta, carotene, beta-cryptosanthin, lutein, zeaxanthin, and lycopene, can reduce the risk of epithelial ovarian cancer. Okay, and the one right below that from the Asia Pacific Journal says higher intakes of lycopene, beta-carotene, and beta-cryptosanthin is associated to a lower risk of breast cancer. So these are, again, talking about what makes these research papers so important is the fact that they're talking about these things together, carotenoids together in synergy, not individually. The idea of looking for that individual magic bullet is what we refer to as the drug paradigm of thinking. The drug industry wants to go out and they want to find that one molecule that they can patent, right? And then they can own that one molecule, and then they want everybody to take it. Sort of like a statin, okay? They want everybody to take a statin drug because they make a lot of money off of that. Now, I'm not suggesting that at times a statin might not be advisable. If you have real trouble with your cholesterol and can't maintain it with proper diet and exercise, then maybe you need a drug intervention. But it is an intervention, okay? It's intervening in a natural process in the body in order to give you some control over your cholesterol levels that you otherwise are incapable of achieving. So don't feel bad about it if you get there, but just recognize that you're causing the body to do something it can't do on its own. That's a drug response. But when you start looking at these carotenoids in groups again, they become very compelling that individually they're great, but in groups they're even better yet. Next slide, please. Here's another one. This is from the Archives of Internal Medicine. That's one of the JAMA publications, Journal of the American Medical Association. These are going to talk about a few carotenoids that you don't always hear about. Everybody have their alpha-carotene today? Because it says serum alpha-carotene concentrations were inversely associated with the risk of death from all causes. Think about that for a moment. Inverse association means that when your alpha-carotene levels, serum alpha-carotene levels, right, in your blood, are high, your probability of death from all causes is low. That's a pretty compelling statement, especially from the Journal of the American Medical Association. And it goes on to say, and cardiovascular disease and cancer and all causes other than cardiovascular disease and cancer. It's almost like they're saying alpha-carotene makes you bulletproof. Okay? So, if you look around at the competitors again, there's no one out there, very few, if any, out there that have got a product that delivers alpha-carotene. Now, alpha-carotene has been on our label since 1992. Okay, that when we introduced the product, we knew it was there. We actually did the work to prove it was there. Not only did we do that, we standardized the amount, so the amount of alpha-carotene that's present there is consistent every time and equal to as much as you would get if you have a salad plate full of carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, and apricots. Okay? Next one says analysis of bioavailable potential health effects of capsanthin. Everybody knows what capsanthin is, right? You didn't even know you needed it, did you? But you do. And this is very emerging, and this particular piece in Food Reviews International says that capsanthin is helpful for disease prevention. They're not exactly sure why yet, because this is very, very new. But when capsanthin is present in significant quantities in your serum, again in your blood, the incidence of disease is dramatically reduced. And the way they do that is they get this epidemiology. They get broad populations, thousands of people. They break them into, they get data about how sick they got, who got sick, who didn't, what they got, when they got it, how quickly they recovered. They break that down into tertiles, thirds or quartiles, quarters or whatever. And then they compare the worst performers against the best performers. And when they looked at the best performers in terms of alpha-carotene in their bloodstream, the probability of disease compared to all the others was any disease was dramatically reduced. Powerful piece of work. Next slide, please. Here's one, carotenoids and prostate cancer. Anybody in the room got a prostate? None of you ladies raise your hands. Some of you men better raise your hands. Okay. This one says, this is in many reviews in medicinal chemistry. This is the chemistry of medicine, if you will. It says higher circulating, again, that word circulating means it's in your blood, levels of alpha-cryptozanthin, alpha-carotene, trans-beta-carotene, lutein, zeaxanthin, and cis-lycopene, all of which are in our product, right, contribute to lower prostate cancer risk. Now, we've known about lycopene and its ability to protect the prostate for a long time. That's why they want you to eat more ketchup. Right? Tomato products, right? So, but we realized, but they didn't realize that there's a synergistic relationship between those carotenoids in there. That lycopene by itself is protective, but lycopene in the presence of all of these others, that protection is dramatically enhanced. Another one right below there, the relationship of plasma carotenoids, plasma in the blood, right, and prostate cancer. It says high circulating levels of alpha-cryptozanthin, alpha-carotene, trans-beta-carotene, lutein, and zeaxanthin may contribute to lower prostate cancer risk. Okay, and this is just two of many studies that continue to point to the fact that carotenoids in general, and that particular cluster of 5 or 6 in particular, have this way of protecting the prostate that they can't do alone, and other nutrients don't do at all. Next slide, please. Another one. Here's cancer prevention research. It says beta-cryptozanthin provides a beneficial effect against cigarette smoke-induced inflammation, oxidation, and DNA damage. Wow. DNA damage. If we think about disease, damage to the DNA, when our DNA becomes damaged, that's a trigger to a lot of different diseases. I mean, you can damage your DNA and go blind. So when they talk about these things, they're talking here about against cigarette smoke-induced damage, inflammation, oxidation, and damage, and squamous cell metaplasia. That's a real powerful statement. Now that's beta-cryptozanthin. Everybody had their beta-cryptozanthin today? Did you talk to the people in line at the supermarket about, oh, look, I see you've got some beta-cryptozanthin. If they've got like a red bell pepper or something like that, you got it covered. You can, oh, I see you don't have any beta-cryptozanthin. Oh my gosh. Right? Not to be confused with kryptonite, which is what got Superman. Okay, this is beta-cryptoxanthin. And then in the journal Carcinogenesis there, it says, the apparent cancer preventive effects. The apparent cancer preventive effects, it's apparent that they prevent cancer. Okay, it's not, again, a question. It's not a maybe. It's not we hope. It's apparent that they prevent dietary carotenoids may depend on enhanced DNA repair. Wow. Now, this is the very front edge of our understanding of nutritional science. When you start getting down inside cells and down inside the nucleus of the cell and down into the DNA, you're getting down in there. And what we're finding is that carotenoids play very important roles. You know, we've always known they've been cell protectors. We showed that, the USDA showed that. We've always known that they've done that, and we knew that they migrated from the outer membrane of the cell to the membrane that's around the nucleus, and another one around the mitochondria. So we knew that they played membrane support functions not only in the outer membrane of the cell, but in the inner membranes as well. So, and now we're beginning to understand that not only do they do that, but when they get in that nuclear membrane and get through there, they can actually, one, defend cells from DNA attack, right? And two, help repair DNA when it becomes damaged. Very, very leading edge stuff. And here's one from the Journal of Food Science that's about canthaxanthin. It says, based on the observed antioxidant and anti-inflammatory protection from astaxanthin and canthaxanthin. Astaxanthin is a fish-based, it's what makes salmon pink. It's an animal-based, and canthaxanthin is a plant-based version of the same molecule. These two compounds were potent agents against neurodegenerative disorders. Okay. Neurodegenerative disorders. This is a new sort of area of thinking for people, that they actually recognize that their brain's an organ and you have to do something about it. You know, there's a drug company out there right now busily trying to create a statin to prevent Alzheimer's. Not literally a statin, but that same equation, because it's become such a concern in an aging population. You know, there's a lot of us going to get very old, and a lot of us will be home, but the lights will be out. That's the fear. I don't mean to make fun of that, because it's a very serious thing, but it's almost so serious that if you don't stop and take a little of the edge off it, you know, you'll be scared to death about getting older. And a lot of people are scared to death about getting older. But these neurodegenerative disorders are more than just Alzheimer's. You know, these sorts of things, neurodegenerative disorder. ALS is a neurodegenerative disorder. A lot of things are related to that, and what we've known for some time is that carotenoids are neuroprotective. Around the ends of the nerves, there's a sheath around there, and that sheath is made of a fatty substance, and carotenoids take up residence in that fatty substance and help protect that from oxidation and other things that would degenerate that sheath and then attack the nerve and cause neuropathy. Right? Diabetic neuropathy occurs through that process. So this is very compelling stuff. Next slide, please. Here's an association of, this is interesting. There's always the linearity of things, what we call the absoluteness of the biology, that it's continuous. This one here says an association of maternal serum concentrations of antioxidants in asthma in children. It's a demonstrated inverse association of maternal serum levels of alpha-carotene, beta-carotene, and beta-cryptoxanthin. In other words, mom's blood carotenoid level with the odds of asthma occurring in her offspring. So now it makes you wonder, how could that be? How could that situation be? Well, when everything is going on, you know, a lot of newborns come up with hyaline membrane. They have trouble breathing. Their lungs aren't fully developed, and so on and so forth. There's a point in the development of the child where this whole idea of being able to take air, they haven't taken any yet, mind you, because they're still being fed through the umbilical cord. They don't take that first breath of air until you give them a smack or they come out crying, right? You guys know how that works. I know you ladies do that have had kids. Yet, how they're going to respond to that first breath and the probability of there being respiration-related diseases or disorders goes back to how much of these nutrients, these carotenoids, mom had in her diet. Because this thing cannot be fully built and fully prepared and fully developed without carotenoids being present, mom. Right? So if you see a lady around, like this, or this, or this, or this, or just big smile on her face because she just learned she's pregnant, or she's of childbearing age, point it out. There's much more compelling evidence about this whole idea. There's evidence about omega-3s and so on and so forth as well. But it's really, really important. And it's also nature's way of showing us how important nutrients are. They are saying these nutrients are so important to life that if mom doesn't get enough, the child is compromised. Really, really fundamental to how the human body works. Next slide, please. So I told you I was going to talk to you about some late-breaking news, and here's some stuff that I picked up just here recently. You'll see dates on here, December, January, February. It takes us a while to get them through the system, get them published, digested, and see if they make sense. But here's one here. It says, American Journal of Epidemiology. The Association of Antioxidants and Cognition from the Nurses' Health Study. Make a long story short, down at the bottom it says, higher carotenoid intake was related to better cognition. Okay, now, that means a couple of things. Not the prevention of a cognitive decline, but better cognition in general. So when people had a lot of carotenoids in their blood, they were better at doing things, cognitive function, answering questions, solutions, and preventing the onset of neurodegenerative cognitive disorders than people who didn't have these things in your blood. So it's a really simple thing. If you want to be smart, take carotenoids. If you want to stay smart, take carotenoids. Okay? If you want to remember that you're smart, take carotenoids. Next slide, please. Here's another one from the European Journal of Public Health. Look, here's an interesting thing. We always talk about the benefits of the high side of things. The Europeans said, well, let's look at what happens when they're not there. So they came out with a study that said low serum lycopene and beta-carotene increases the risk of acute myocardial infarction in men. That's a heart attack. Okay? It's an acute heart attack. You don't want to have any heart attack at all, but you certainly, acute is what leads to fatal, right? A fatal one, you know what that is. Acute means you got right there and maybe they saved you. Okay. So when these things are low, we talk about when they're high, you have a stronger heart, a lower risk of the disease. But or heart disease or heart attack, what they showed is that when they're low, it increases the risk. It just sort of validates the other side of the equation. Okay, if I get a bunch, I'm reduced at risk, but if I don't have a bunch, I'm okay, right? No, you're not. You are definitely at risk. If you don't have these things, you are definitely at risk, okay? And the probability numbers, if you look at the statistical evaluations in there, it's not small. It's something like 30 to 45% greater risk when these things are not present. Next slide, please. This is the International Journal of Clinical Oncology. You know what oncologists are. They're the people who deal with cancer. Okay, this is from the Journal of Clinical Oncology. It says, inverse association between serum in the blood, concentrations of zeaxanthin and other carotenoids and colorectal neoplasias in Japanese. Now, it doesn't really matter if it's Japanese or whatever, right? It's all the same biological system going on. They look a little different and speak a little different, but biologically inside, we're a universal model in the sense that we all function the same way, even though each one of us is individually different, and that there'll never be two of us who are identical. Even identical twins are not totally identical in the whole wide world, ever. It goes on to say high serum zeaxanthin, lutein, alpha-carotene, and beta-carotene showed significant, can you read that, inverse association with cancer development. Wow. Again, a group of carotenoids, and when they're there, inverse means that when they're high, development of cancer is low and vice versa, right? So when carotenoids are high in your diet, the probability of a cancer developing is low. When carotenoids are low in your diet, the probability of a cancer developing is high. Next slide, please. Here's one, cancer prevention research, beta-cryptozanthin, also known as BCX, for those of you who wonder what the BCX stands for. It says beta-cryptozanthin restores nicotine-induced lung, SRTR, don't worry about that, to normal levels and inhibits nicotine-promoted lung tumorigenesis and emphysema. You can have breathing problems, lung problems that don't necessarily have to be cancerous. You can have benign tumors in your lungs that result in emphysema and other breathing respiration disorders. So if you look down in there, down towards the bottom, it said, moreover, BCX, that's beta-cryptozanthin, supplementation increased survival probability. Wow. So even when they got this thing, the probability of survival was increased just because this carotenoid was present. And down at the bottom it says BCX is a preventive agent against emphysema and lung cancer. Wow, that's a powerful statement. This is a serious group, the cancer prevention research. They're not subject to making statements they can't back up. They said that beta-cryptozanthin is preventive against lung cancer and emphysema. Did you know that? Okay, a lot of people out there have trouble breathing. They don't come to this altitude because it gets real troublesome. Next slide, please. This is an online, I don't know if you guys go online and look around, PLOS is an online service that's provided where you can subscribe and they send you everything about a related compound. If you want to know about carotenoids, just type it in there and they'll bury you. Some days I get 20 to 25 scientific references on a single subject. This one says high serum carotenoids, again, broad serum carotenoids, associated with lower risk of bone loss and osteoporosis. Wow, now that's a surprise, huh? Who would have thought that carotenoids played a role in bone loss? Well, it's not exactly clear yet how they do it, but it makes sense that it does, in the sense that when you look at all of the other things that it's involved in, carotenoids are involved in, it wouldn't make sense for them to not be involved somehow in the production and maintenance, protection and correction for bone health, bone tissue. It says antioxidant carotenoids, especially beta-cryptozanthin and beta-carotene, are inversely associated with the change of radial bone mineral density, right, in postmenopausal female subjects. So again, if you think about how the female body works and what goes on with estrogenic activity and how when estrogen declines over time, the body can become imbalanced. It makes sense that these nutrients would play a role there. Like I said, we don't know exactly how yet. This is very new. It's just something that's come up recently. It's observational data, but observational data is important. Next slide, please. There it is. This is from the Annals of Neurology, January 2013. Intakes of vitamin C and carotenoids and the risk of ALS. Right? Pooled results from 5 cohort studies. That means they took 5 studies on this thing and they pooled all the results together to get a larger body of evidence. And then within that body of evidence, they mined it for certain things. They looked for certain things. And what they found is high intakes of carotenoid compounds, not one but many, may help to prevent or delay the onset of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Prevent or delay. If again you think about that comment I made about neurodegeneration and how those things happen, oxidative stress, things that would attack the ends of nerves. In the case of ALS, that's just at a greater level of activity. The mechanism is just more driven, so the process happens more rapidly. So, but you can still, if you have a probability, let's say that you are genetically predisposed to this disease. Okay? This tells me that even though I'm genetically predisposed, if I have a high carotenoid diet, I can actually reduce the probability or delay the onset of this happening. We see that occurring in a lot of these sorts of diseases where a diet rich in good things like carotenoids can actually prevent or slow down the progression We showed that in a study we did on cruciferous plush a few years ago. Just a little aside here, where we showed that when cruciferous plush was present in the diet, it slowed the progression of the breast cancer cells, the MCF7 breast cancer cell that we used in this National Cancer Institute study. It showed that we can slow the pace of that to 1/10 the speed normal, meaning that if you were to develop breast cancer and it were to develop into something serious over a 2 or 3 year period of time, this would tell us in an optimum situation that could take 20 or 30 years instead of 2 or 3 to become serious. So this idea that you can, through really abundant and focused nutrition, delay the onset of things is important. And they go on to say the greater total carotenoid intake was linked to reduced risk of ALS. Again, total carotenoid intake. I keep coming back to this because it's an important subject. Next slide, please. So, here we are with the total carotenoid. Okay? Literally, we do not sell this product well enough, because in order for somebody to understand the importance of what carotenoid complex means, we couldn't call the product all those 15, they can't just say beta carotene like some or vitamin C. You'd have to list all 15 carotenoids. Right? We couldn't do that. No one would read the label. They wouldn't let us do it anyway. The type would be too small. But carotenoid complex is the complete total carotenoid supplement. It's the only product of its kind on the market. Not only was it the first product of its kind and continues to retain that perspective, but it is the only product of its kind on the market. We look around. There's other people out there selling carotenoids, but they are not like this product. They don't confine themselves to human natural ingredients. They don't assure that there's this broad spectrum of carotenoids there. They don't standardize to make sure they're there every time. Don't use whole food sources, all of those sorts of things. It's really very important. So what makes this product even more important is where we can take it from here. Next slide, please. We have tons of evidence about this product. Remember I said that you don't have to trust you or me. You don't have to trust me. Go read these journals. Go read these articles. They'll tell you that exactly. Listen to what the researchers from the USDA and the CDC and all these other places said about carotenoid complex and what it can do. Because there's proof, unequivocal, peer-reviewed journal, published proof that the product does that. Next slide, please. First of all, I talked about the fact that these things need to be in your blood. It's nice that they're in your product, but if they don't get in your blood, big deal. Isn't going to do anything. We have bioavailability studies done over and over and over. We did a couple of them right off the bat. These were the first ever studies of this kind done. No one had ever done human bioavailability studies on carotenoids like this prior to when we did them in the early 1990s. Okay. One of those that was published first in the New York Academy of Sciences was what resulted in us being invited to present that research at the New York Academy of Sciences. The first ever time that a network marketing direct seller was ever invited to present scientific research at the New York Academy of Sciences. That went on to be published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Again, a very staunch peer-reviewed deal. What it said is that when you take carotenoid complex that contains these standardized 5 carotenoids that we found there at that time, we were able to put, now we know there's 15, but 5 that we had standardized for, guess what? They get in your blood. We knew at the time that it was important to be able to validate that they get into your blood, and once in your, and all of them get in your blood, and once in your blood that they were transported around. So that's what those studies showed. Okay, next slide, please. When we were at the New York Academy of Sciences meeting, in the room that day were some researchers from the USDA's Human Nutrition Research Center, some from the Beltsville, Maryland laboratory, and some from the San Francisco laboratory. And they were in the audience, and they came up and asked us some questions afterwards. I was there with Dr. First and Dr. Karubi doing the presentation. A few months after that, actually just a few weeks after that, I guess 5 or 6 weeks after that, they came back and approached us and said, would we allow them to do some research, human clinical trials, using our product, Carotenoid Complex, to use it as a model, to then give them a mechanism by which they can recommend how much fruits and vegetables people need to eat. Okay? Because we had standardized it so we knew they were all there, made from carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell pepper, etc. And we had standardized them. They looked at it and said, we can use this because it's a known entity. And when we give it to people, then we can look what happens in their blood and look what happens in their body and look what happens in their cells. And then we can go back and work that formula backwards and say you need to eat 4 cantaloupes a week. Don't take me seriously. No, cantaloupe's good for you, but that's not what they said. They could work that back into saying, okay, they need so much alpha carotene or so much beta carotene or so much lycopene or so much lutein or so much zeaxanthin. Then they could work that back and say, well, to get that much zeaxanthin, you'd have to eat this much spinach, or to get that much of this carotenoid, you'd have to eat that much tomato. Okay, that was what their goal was, and so we said, sure, and then we gave them thousands of carotenoid complex capsules and some technical support. The first thing they did was run a bioavailability study and prove what we had proven, that they get in your bloodstream. And then they went on to prove that once they're in your bloodstream, they hitch a ride around on the LDL cholesterol molecule and protect that molecule from oxidative attack that leads to the formation of plaque. See, what happens is LDL gets oxidized, and when it's oxidatively modified, it forms a foam cell. And as those foam cells go around, they lodge up against things in the arterial wall, and after a few years or decades, that results in a plaque. Other things accumulate in there, like some calcium or other minerals that might be present. But that's how the process works. So they proved that carotenoid complex actually reduces oxidative stress in the blood, and thus reducing your risk of heart disease. They published that in that journal of free radical biology and medicine. The next thing they showed is when it gets traveled around there, it gets off of the LDL cholesterol bus and jumps into the cell membrane. It moves into the cell membrane, and once in the cell membrane, it actually reduces oxidative attacks on those membranes. It actually protects the membrane. Carotenoids will actually, when an oxidizing agent comes up to a cell membrane and a carotenoid is there, it will be attracted to the carotenoid. The affinity between the oxidative agent and the carotenoid is stronger, there's a stronger attraction than to the membrane of the cell. Thus the cell is protected. If the carotenoids aren't there, guess what the oxidative molecule does? It reacts with the membrane. So they proved that when carotenoid complex is in your blood, it gets in your cell membranes and dramatically reduces, like by half, these oxidative effects that take place on your cells, thus protecting your cells. One of the primary mechanisms that prevent cancer, and which is why we know so much about cancer prevention in carotenoids today. Okay? Very, very important. And they published that in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And then they went around, no, they published that in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition, excuse me. It's hard to keep up with all this. And then they went further and they looked at, well, you know, we've known for some time that carotenoids modulate immunity. We had seen it in some animal models and so on. You know, if you have a high carotenoid diet, markers of immunity are high. If you take those carotenoids away, markers of immunity will plummet. Give it back, they'll come up. Take them away, they'll go down. Give it back, they'll come up. Take it away, they'll go down. That's well established. What they wanted to see is a couple of things. They wanted to see if synthetic beta-carotene had that same property, one. And two, if our carotenoid-rich extracts, which had these known amounts of carotenoids in them, would actually provide that benefit, and what that benefit might be. Well, here's what they showed, two-part study. First of all, they showed that synthetic beta-carotene did not do that. When they put people on a carotenoid-depleted diet, carotenoids go down, markers of immunity go down, and then they gave them synthetic beta-carotene, it kept going down. Okay? Because you see, synthetic beta-carotene really isn't beta-carotene. It's a molecule made from acetylene that resembles beta-carotene, natural beta-carotene. It was actually developed as a food color. How many of you remember when margarine came out in a little pouch and it had that little red button in there? That was beta-carotene, right? You bust the button. My job when I was a little kid, because we thought margarine was the cat's meow, right? The cat didn't like it though. But so you'd bust that, and then I'd squeeze the bag, and after a while, this white lardy-looking stuff would look like butter, and it made us feel much better. look, it looks like butter, it must be good for you. Okay, but it was developed for that. Later on, people thought, well, you know, if we can sell them this stuff made from acetylene, we can make more money on that than we can selling the gas to welders. Okay, seriously, it's made from acetylene. So, no surprise to us that it didn't go back. So they did this, they did the depletion for 60 days, and then they gave them 20 days worth of beta-carotene, and nothing happened. And then the last 20 days, they gave them just 3 carotenoid complex capsules a day, and guess what? Not only did they recover all of the immune power that they had lost, the lymphocyte proliferative responsiveness, how many immune warriors you can produce, and how quickly, and natural killer cell production, the first line of defense against cancer. Not only did we reclaim, the people in this human clinical trial reclaim all that they'd lost in the previous 80 days, but in just 20 days they were above baseline. They came out of the study even having gone through that with better carotenoid status and better immune status than when they walked in off the streets. They published that in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They also went all around the country and the world telling these stories in scientific meetings, dozens of them. So the story got really well told. If you read those things, they say, thank you, Neolife, or thank Carotenoid Complex, and down in the 3rd, 4th, 5th page back in there, you can point to it and say, see, told you so. And really powerful. Next slide, please. Later on, we actually improved this thing a little further, and we got a couple of publications in the presentations and publications in the Federation of Societies for Experimental Biology that looked into the relationship between certain carotenoids and LDL cholesterol and how that transport mechanism works. What does it get in there and stick out its thumb? How does it get on? How does it work its way onto that cholesterol molecule, and how does it get off when it gets where it's going? So looking into, we knew that happened, so we looked into cholesterol as a transport system, right? The LDL cholesterol as a transport system and the role of carotenoids. And we also did more bioavailability studies. This time we expanded it to include 8, I think, or 9 in there. Next slide, please. So this is a list of the human clinical trial. This is the human clinical data that proves what I just told you about carotenoid complex is true. This is just the human clinical data, just that which was published in peer-reviewed journals. So this is a list of facts, right? This is not something where you have to ask your neighbor, your brother-in-law, your skeptical sister to trust you. You just have to ask her to be reasonably intelligent and believe the scientific data. This stuff really works. And it's a compelling message that everyone needs to hear. All of that stuff I told you in the beginning here about carotenoids and all of that stuff, that's all true, folks. It's all true. You need these things. These are biologically fundamental to how we work, or how we're supposed to work. We know that when they're not there, there's trouble. Okay? When they are there, there's joy. That's called health. Right? And health and joy are closely related. Okay. So we need to take these sorts of things seriously. Next slide, please. Thank you.